Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick McCullough, and I'm the president of Hallmark Business Connections, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Katarina Berg. Katarina is a globally recognized HR leader and author known for her bold approach to transformation and culture building. This August, she will officially begin her role as Chief Human Resources Officer at the Swiss performance sportswear brand On. Before joining On, Katarina spent more than a decade at Spotify, where she led the global HR team starting in 2013. Along the way, she also oversaw global workplace services, strategy operations, and brand and creative, helping shape Spotify's journey from a fast-growing startup into a mature international powerhouse. Her career journey also includes senior HR leadership roles at multinational organizations in the banking and energy and entertainment verticals, where Katarina developed a passionate focus for reinventing processes and nurturing teams where creative and passionate people can do their best work, something that speaks to our heart at Hallmark very much so. She's also the author of Bold, where she shares insights on leadership, transformation, and challenging the status quo. Outside of work, she's likely cooking for friends and family and exploring new places, or dreaming of her days traveling the world whitewater rafting. Okay, I might need to hear a little bit more about that. Katarina, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. That was a mouthful, and thank you for that really lovely introduction.
Of course. So you're stepping into a new role as CHRO at On after more than a decade at Spotify. Both of those companies have really, bold cultures and very strong brands. I'm curious, as you're thinking about this new role, what do you think is going to stay with you as you start this next chapter? And what are you maybe excited to build a little bit differently?
So first of all, very early days because I haven't started yet, but there was something that captured me with On and the conversations with the three founders and the CEO. And more so, I felt the energy in my body and compared that with the conversation I had with a couple of other really nice and big and obviously, I think, inspirational brands. But there's something to all of us, I think, that is the things that gets us going. And I think it's culture. And as you said and mentioned yourself, is like, I think Spotify has at least up to now been very famous for the culture. And I think On has been very famous for its spirit. So it's two companies that are well known for how you treat your people, daring to be people first, and having that maybe as a part of the business idea as well. So what will I add or maybe change or grow or develop? I don't know. Too early. I think that would be very rude of me, and also coming in a bit hot, thinking that I already know what they need or what they don't need. So I'm looking forward, and I think that is the main reason why you change jobs too, right?
Sure, absolutely. I'm curious, as you've led people operations at companies that, are known for autonomy, certainly distributed and global teams, rapid periods of growth. I think we have historically seen that environments that are like that can make recognition harder, especially harder to stabilize and standardize. But as you think about the rapid change that exists in those environments, it's maybe even more important. What does meaningful recognition look like in a fast-paced and kind of high autonomy workplace?
It might be a quite boring answer, but I think it needs to be, clear what it is so people can choose and also choose not to, right? I think you owe that to people that apply, that they kind of understand what they can expect coming into a company. And I think most HR people talk a lot about, employee branding and EVP and all that, blah, blah, blah. But I think that is important, especially if you understand that that is everything you do, everything you don't do, and everything in between. And how do you sort that out? So clarity, one, manage expectations. Two, I think the second C is very much about, being very consistent. And that doesn't mean that you are change avert, but it means that whatever you say that you are, the philosophy, your culture, and the people that are the culture, and the culture is the people, it evolves. But it is built on kind of a couple of things that are, the constant in a world that is changing all the time, to your point. And then I think if you mix those two, the clarity and the consistency, that becomes compelling. It doesn't mean that it's a flavor for all, but it is very clear who would like to join that company or that organization and who will thrive in it. And so it's never about right or wrong. It's more about being relevant as a culture. I also think it's very dangerous you can hear a lot of people, and especially maybe founders, that talk about strong culture. But we all know that culture could also be toxic, right? So you don't want to necessarily to have a strong culture. You want to have the right culture for that right moment in that right phase. So it needs to evolve again, because if it doesn't, you say to the OGs that they don't matter when you bring in people and it changes. But you also say to the new people, if it doesn't change, that, hey, you don't matter either, because we're going to only keep it as it was in the good old days, right? So I think you have to be very conscious and very intentional when you do this. And I think that is why also it's one of the biggest passions that I do have within the 171 colors of the HR palette, right?
Of course. I'm curious, as you touched on culture there and the balance of how culture evolves and managing that within the human resources space and the employee experience practice. Certainly, there are elements of HR employee experience and culture that can be manufactured or implemented, practices and procedures. But can culture itself be manufactured? Have you found that over the years?
I think it can, but I think it's actually, obviously there are more than two schools, but I think there are people that says you cannot work with culture, you can't design it, you can't actually affect it. I think I subscribe to the letter, where I think you can, and I think you can be very intentional. And I think as a behavioral scientist myself, I think it's exactly what that is. And it's not about HR doing that. It's not even about the CEO or the founder. I think that is something that you create with inside, right? But what you can do, which is the intentional part, is you can have an idea, or the same way as you as a business have a business theory, you can also have like a game theory of how do we want to play, right? How do we come to work? How do we show up? What behaviors do we want to see? What behaviors don't we want to see? And that kind of creates a foundation of what you are trying to accomplish as a set of, you can call it policies. I don't necessarily believe in policies, or rules. I don't necessarily think people get excited about rules, but I think it's more like game theory or a playbook of how you would like to make sure that your company becomes a very successful or a great business. And this, I think, for sure, you can be very kind of proactive, and you can design, but I think the most dangerous position you can get into is that you cling on to something that really helped you, or that was really important in an early phase, and then it becomes kind of almost like in the book Meant to Mice, when you kind of squeeze it to death, in a sense that it doesn't make sense in the next phase. And I think the culture should really mirror what you're trying to do and be very close to the business and enable it, rather than something that is quite fluffy, or something that we talk about because we want to make ourselves a bit nicer, or just because it's kind of the thing that is right to say or do. I think it's very much of how you would like to drive your business.
Yeah. Speaking of that and how you drive that business, I'm curious your thoughts on the notion that recognition needs to feel genuine. So many companies stand up recognition programs, but they tend to be maybe a little bit performative, often top down, which then you lose that authenticity and the genuineness of the action, the behavior. How do you make sure, if you want to have a culture of recognition, that it stays genuine?
If you don't necessarily put all these programs or perks or benefits or recognition as separate satellites, I think they need to be, for one, part of the same system, but I think they need to mirror and come from that philosophy of how you run your company, right? And then it makes sense that they become very easy to understand. I think it's a very strange word, fair, because life is not fair, but it takes away that, hey, if I wasn't in the room, did I miss something? Or I don't necessarily now understand how we reward people. If you can be very open and transparent about how you put that together and what you want them to do for you, I think it calms everybody down. It also brings the focus of what you would like people to do, especially if you are running a company. And then I think if you can explain in a very easy way what the rewards are there for, what they're supposed to do, and also how, again, the criteria to actually get that reward, I think it kind of take away the drama in many ways. I think it also makes it easy for people to understand, what do I need to do or to accomplish. I think if you can create programs, or if you can have an incentivize, but it goes back to that openness and transparency, not necessarily what Patrick or Katarina gets as a reward, but how the mechanism and the program is designed. I think that is back to the relevance, but also if you can make them very genuine. There are other things that are not necessarily just, monetary things that could be even more important, which has to do with, is it genuine of what type of company you say, or can you build on things that are quite unique? If I take an example from Spotify, a Swedish company, European company, therefore. So when we launched 2015 global parental leave, that is, it was an easy thing to do in the way of, we had practiced that for more than 30 years for both parents, no matter if it's same sex or a mom and a dad, or mom and dad and dad. We hadn't necessarily practiced it for surrogacy and for adoption fully as long, but for us to do that and put that into kind of a global parental program for parts of the world that never had 480 days as we have in Sweden. So you take the things that are very, I think, near and dear to your heart. You take it with experience that you have. You blend it, and you talk about putting Swedish values on expert. And then I think people can understand that it is genuine. That is the way that our society, that is how our culture, but also how our companies are built. And to be able to give people that are not from Sweden, if you're a truly global company, that special time that never comes back, when it's mostly important, that they can have 6 months with their kids and 1 month to ease back. If you don't understand how attractive that is, but also that it will retain people that are in that special age, but nobody will go, hey, that is just performative. No, it comes from our roots. So I think you need to be smart in that sense, that you build on something that is very close to you, where people also, hey, okay, now I see the picture, I see how you're moving, which means also in a country like ours, where it's not necessarily as common or well used, bonuses for everything, like a spot bonus or a sign-on bonus, because we find that to be sugar rushes, right? Because, okay, so what else will you do? Or isn't that you are signing, right? Anyway, why would you get a sign-on bonus? Or you are performing, shouldn't that will be part of your total reward? So I think if you are very consistent back to the second C, I think people will find it as genuine, and they will also understand. It will be confusing for a lot of people, especially if they're not from that part of the world. But I think this is just a couple of examples how you can do that, so people feel like at ease a bit, understand it, and get the bigger picture. But again, where who you say you are and what you want to be and how people perceive you as a company, organization, or a team, or a leader. I think when that is kind of on top of each other, it's much, much easier for people to relax, in that sense that they are not worrying about what's happening if they're not in the room.
Yeah. It reminds me of a conversation I had once with a friend who was also a CHRO for a large conglomerate, who said that the minute they stopped talking about their benefits and started talking about their values, everyone started to understand why they were doing what they were doing, right? And it's a different kind of a practice when you root it that way. Yeah.
Very, very true. And we all know that, when trust goes up, speed goes up, right? And speed is one of those kind of, I think, currencies that every company is talking about. And then when trust goes down, speed also goes down. So it takes a long time to build that trust, and it goes very fast to kind of break it down. And to your friend's point, I think that is very, very important that you do that. And any company that dares to be value driven, I think they have a home run, because it's kind of scary. You have to be a bit bold, and you open up yourself for a lot of criticism. But I think, much scarier to think about the opposite. Dare to be value driven and trust based, I think is a good foundation for any efficiency.
Yeah, dare to be value driven. I think that's the headline here. So I'm curious, as you think about trust, at Spotify and now at On, you're going to be leading HR functions and practices across a lot of different time zones and cultures and geographies. How do you think, or how have you approached kind of internal comms and communications and the internal corporate practices in a way that still feels personal instead of one size fits all, regardless of that global and kind of diverse focus that you live in?
Again, yet another good question. No, but internal comms, we all know every company that with more than 2 employees have a problem with internal communication. That is how hard it is. You have to respect that, right? And it's always, we always say it's on the receiver end, like they decide if it was good communication. And then when you come up in the numbers of a lot of employees, not everybody's going to think it's like brilliant the way that you communicate. But again, I think you need to decide. And in most companies I work with, and the 2 that you mentioned, I think the openness and transparency is one of the keys, right? Because you can go wrong, but if people dare to ask question, you could always get the communication right. You can go back on the nuances. If you also understand that some people prefer to read, some people want to hear, most people would also get the chance to ask questions to kind of, okay, now I understand. But I think one of the things that I usually used to say at Spotify, which I think is true, and I think one of the things that you owe your people is that they don't necessarily have to, agree with all decisions, even like them. But what you owe to everybody in your organization is that they understand the decision, right? So that means that you have to hit and remind. You have to communicate and over-index on communication, especially when it is about change. I think, you talk to most people, and I used to say when we had our intro days to all our employees, like, how many people like change here? And, more than 50% go like, yes, I like change. But, they are liars, because we only like the change we initiate ourselves, right? When we think it's a good thing, we sit with all the information, it makes sense, or you motivated enough to change, right? We all know that running or exercising is good. Doesn't mean that we all do that. Most people that are smokers, I'm pretty sure that they know it's not good for them, but they don't stop, right? It's quite hard. So it's the mix of the information and the database and the data sets, but also motivation. So I think you owe it to your employees so they understand. And then they can make a decision. Do I want to stay? Does this, vibe or jive with me? Or, I think it makes perfect sense. Let's go. I didn't just understand it. So I think internal comms is much more important than most companies make it. I think it's actually very strategic. I think it's also one of the things that are very connected with whatever you call the function, people or talent or HR. And to not have them together, I think it's a missed opportunity to make sure that, because 80% of all the communication that goes out in the organization actually comes from HR. So for them to sit with another department but communication is a profession by itself. So it doesn't mean that the BPs or HR people, but then I think you break it down. Everybody needs to find their voice. And again, how do you make it genuine or authentic or whatever word you would like to call it? It is because if you're there more than a year, people understand how you communicate, right? So it has to have your tone of voice. Otherwise, people are, who wrote it for you, right? And I'm not talking about just, your friend chat, GPT these days, or for everybody that are using another tool, that tool for that matter. I think you have to be honest. For the longest time, most executives had somebody at comms prepare things, and neither is cheating. It's just, it's a very important kind of occupation and a function. But it needs to be my tone of voice when it's me writing to the organization, your tone of voice when it's you. The other thing is when an organization communicates to all its employees, I think it also needs to find, is it relaxed or is it corporate? What is it? And here I think people can live with either or the nuances in between. I think again, they just need to recognize. But I also think that most people these days, no matter age, no matter industry, I don't think people really like corporate if we do corporate is the same thing as a lot of very, I don't want to say, I'm trying not to say a bad word, but a lot of words that don't say anything, but sound really kind of old school and trying to do what I would call look a bird instead of, hey, let's face it, we have a hard time. This is what we're going to do. And these are the reasons why. I think most people just want you to almost write the way that you speak. So I think there are a lot of levers where you can use and find your own voice as an organization, as a function, as an individual, as a leader, and then be very true to that. And work with professional people, because when people don't get it, it's very hard to get anything done.
Yeah, it is funny, the criticism that comes on the comm side. Would you, when it comes to your personal health, no one criticizes anyone for seeing a doctor. When it comes to your personal fitness, no one criticizes you for hiring a trainer. When it comes to effective communications, though, suddenly there's sometimes can be some stigma there. But I think your point about authenticity is key here. And I'm curious your perspective, because Spotify and other stops, I'm sure, are going to give you a great example and perspective on this. Authenticity is key, of course, right? Authenticity in communications is critical. People want to hear someone from their own voice and hear that they're coming to the table in a senior executive or a director in an authentic way. But at publicly traded companies or even just large multinational companies, legal is in the room, risk is in the room, on top of comms and on top of all the other leadership. How do you counsel leaders of all stripes and at all levels when it comes to this idea of authenticity and risk and help them find the right balance?
I'm laughing a bit because I have an ongoing kind of chess game with a close friend of mine, Dr. Thomas Chamaro from music, where he says authentic is not a good thing, and you should have him on this podcast. It's going to be a lovely conversation. He's a psychologist among a lot of things, where he could talk to you why it's not good to be authentic and that there's nothing kind of called authentic. But I will just do what I usually do in that conversation. I would go, I understand what you mean with authentic, and I think it's important to be authentic. I think I have learned this in every conversation I have had with different professional people, especially the ones that you are mentioning now, depending on what industry it is. It's also a very good way of keeping information, meaning power, by saying we can't talk about that. It's also a very good way for a lot of people to say we can't do that because it's not compliant, this and that, because by doing that, you don't have to change. We do a lot of things also because it could be a habit. I would like to challenge that a bit. There's a lot of things, even if you're public, that you can answer. If you decided that you're not just going to talk in a quarterly kind of way, if you dare to be there for the longer run and not just give the market exactly what they want for that quarter. Obviously, I'm not sitting here and saying that you're going to break the law. That would be really stupid of me. But I think you should always challenge why you wouldn't be able to do things as long as it doesn't affect the market, right? And there's a lot of things. And one of the things that I thought was really smart when we decided to go public was that we put every employee on the inside list, which meant that we could talk a lot about things, but they couldn't trade, right? Except for the very short windows. The second thing is because then you could still inform a lot of people. The other thing is there are a couple of things that you can't answer on a town hall or, on an unplugged, because it will have a direct effect for the market. And then we had to go from a private company to public company, just saying that, acknowledging. It's a very interesting question, but this is exactly one of those questions we could answer before, but not any longer. And then usually people understand that maybe what they was asking is exactly what's happening right now. People are not stupid. Here, I think you should just treat people as grown-ups, right? And they will understand why you are not able to say. But I don't necessarily agree, and I don't think it's true that most of the time when people say we can't talk about that, we can't communicate that, or we can't do that because we're a publicly traded company, it isn't like that. I think it's usually somebody that wants to keep their cards very close to the body, keep having the power on a very few hands, or they don't want to change, or they actually don't know the rules really well enough. So it's the safer hand to play.
So let's circle back to the topic of recognition. At Hallmark Business Connections, we often talk about the power of small intentional gestures. Think, a handwritten birthday or work anniversary card, or even just a timely message of appreciation. Our clients use our solutions like automatic mailings to try to make that really seamless. Do you believe still that these kinds of small moments of recognition matter, even in really large and often digital first companies?
I think even more so. And I think even more so going forward, because where I think the technology is helping us progress in so many areas, and they take away a lot of things that is time consuming, even tedious or very repetitive, which a Christmas card or something else, right? A handwritten note could also be. But I think we are longing for that personal touch. I think that means more that people set aside the thing that is usually the thing you don't have enough of time to do something that is handwritten, or I just sat down and thought about something that is between you and I, that doesn't have to do with big gestures, a lot of money. I think it's going to be even more and more important that it is. And I think it always set the people that took that time, no matter if it was friends, family, colleagues, teachers, or managers or organizations. So I can't see everything that is, human to human. I think it's going to become more and more important.
I totally agree. And like you said, it tends to be the gesture, right, that carries as much impact as the message. Or the medium. I'm curious, as you think back across your career, is there a time that comes to mind when maybe a simple gesture or someone reaching out with a quick note really made a meaningful impact, or a moment in your professional career where it was perfectly timed?
Yeah, I think I've been blessed with really good managers in many ways, and some of them have been very good at what we are discussing exactly now. And I think it's for me, it's not the birthdays, because I'm not necessarily celebrating them myself. But I think, when you do things and you're not shouting out from the mountains that you went or you walked that extra mile or 200 miles, for somebody, and in my case, it was my closest manager, the CEO, who reached out to me and in her very specific, very personal way, let me know that I see you, and I appreciate you. I remember still, because it wasn't early in my career, but I thought that was very effectful, because in many ways it made me work even harder. So also very smart. I'm pretty sure that was not the reason why she did that, but that was the effect it got. It made me feel proud, and proud people perform right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the nature of how culture can affect recognition. So as we've talked about already here today, you've led these human resource departments and these big global teams with lots of different kinds of cultures melded together, lots of different kinds of traditions. In your experience in this space, how do you make sure that recognition continues to feel inclusive across this wide spectrum of folks who are joining in with on a team?
So it's a tricky question, because we all know that we also read recognition differently. So almost on an individual level. And to make it even harder, it changes also over time and in life, and also depending where you are emotionally, but also in your career, because we're talking about workspace now. So if you put all of that, it has so many different aspects. And it's like most questions, it's all about perspective, right? But I think the hardest part is it's timing. It's timing in your life. It's timing of what you did, and also the tone of voice. So nobody wants to be pampered or like, that was really good. And nobody also wants everything, all your efforts to go like totally lost on everybody. So here I think it's very much up to be very observant as a manager or organization. So I think that is one thing. And then I'm going to say something that is 100% contradicting that. It is that most of the time, people are also very conscious about, is it fair in that sense that, am I getting the same kind of recognition like everybody else? So to have a foundation that, no matter if you are in the Singapore office or the Sydney office, or if you're in the Sao Paulo office or the New York office, that it's kind of similar, one, to the standards of what's happening in that region or in that country or even in that city. Then to the standards of the company where you want to be. So it's a mix of all of that I think make people feel that they are seen, heard, and that they matter, which I think we all have a longing to get that recognition within ourselves. And then I think most companies do a mistake, right? You don't make a joke or you don't mess up people's reward. And I'm talking about, base salary, equity, if you have that, commission, if you have that, or bonuses, if you have that, or anything of that. Very few people, if they are paid fairly, are passionate about that. It's more about the things that we are talking about now. Having a boss that wants to develop you, sometimes challenge you, push back sometimes, and say, I usually are very, very much, in love with the work you do. I think you do tremendous things for us. And very, very often it's not a small feat either. But today I saw you cut the corner. It means that you see the difference, right? You see when people are making the effort and hitting the bar or even raising the bar. I think these are the things. The other thing that we don't talk that much about, that I think is important, if you don't call out the people that are not carrying their own load, the people that are not doing their work, they are talented enough, they have the skill set to do it, they have the training and the education to do it, but they're just not doing it for different reasons. For you not to call that out is also not rewarding the people that always show up, that always do what they're supposed to do and then some. So I think it's about having kind of a very kind of close eye on what's happening, and then have a very good and ongoing dialogue with all your people so they know. And then sometimes when people are not doing their fair share, to have a dialogue too, because it could be for all the good reasons. Life is not easy, and it hits us differently, and you have all challenges. But then you could also, if you create that environment where you dare to be trust-based, and you are value-driven, where you most likely can have an open conversation in the team too, that this person or he, she, they will talk to that, which means that nobody else needs to be annoyed that, hey, why is this person getting all this extra time, or why doesn't he, she, they need to show up the same way as most others? So I think it's very individual. I think that is why it's never been harder to be a manager or a leader. It's never been more complex. These days it's never either or. It's always both and. It's a lot of kind of paradoxes. As I said, very complex, challenging. Everybody has the same information and data that you have. So you can never play like, well, I know more than you. You need to be communicative, even if you are an introvert. But it's never been more fun, because of it's tricky, and it's not necessarily, it's quite a quiet taste, and it's not for the faint-hearted. And you have to develop, and you're never done. So it's a very positive thing, but I think you should think about it, and only do it if you're up for it. Because if people don't feel that you are rewarding them for the right things, you might lose them.
That's right. So let's touch on something that I think you just hit on a little bit, and we talked about earlier, which is this nature of belonging, especially with teams that have embedded and in cultures that have been organically grown over many years. Bringing new people onto those teams can be difficult, and folks can find it hard to find that sense of belonging and fit in as the culture evolves over time. I'm curious if you have found over the years if there's any rituals or rhythms that you've used successfully to try and reinforce and develop this idea of belonging in companies as they grow and change.
Whoever cracks that code, 100%, I think they are ever so lucky in their organizations, and then they can be selling that on bottles everywhere. I mean, diversity is not easy. Inclusion is harder. Belonging might be even harder, right? But I think you need to focus on inclusion and belonging, because what is it that makes it interesting that you play for this team or have this kind of team on your blazer and not another one? And it's never about excluding something, because the easiest game there is to build an in group, and therefore you need an out group, right? So how do you do that? But I think it's very much about attribution. I think it's very much about things that are reminded within your value-driven organization of what do you reward? What behaviors do you reward? How do you make sure that for every newcomer that comes in, that they feel that they are part of that group? How are you very intentional about trying to become more and more diverse? Because numbers obviously count, and everything, as we all know, that what you measure is also gonna happen. But if it was easy, then every organization would have cracked that code, right? Then diversity would look really good. But I think it comes with a couple of things that we should talk more about. And where I think it's been successful is when you talk about the tax it comes with, and also what you need to do. If you only release it to the belonging part, I think when you start to think about it as a team sport, this is where a couple of things will make it easier, right? If you played sports, in my case, I did, and team sport, how do you make people feel that they are part of that team, no matter if they are on the bench or not, right? How do you make sure that everybody can feel both the joy but also the pain, depending on what's happening? And there are a couple of things that I think we all are doing better, and some even really great now, of how do you make sure that for us on board and almost culture vaccinate people, in the sense that, hey, you're one of us now. And yes, there's going to be a couple of things that are good, hopefully, and some that are great, but some that are bad and ugly too. So how do we fix them together? And I think, again, if you have the open and transparency, if you call things by the right names, if you call out things where people are not necessarily inclusive, and if you feel that there is a moment where you didn't feel like you belonged, if you can create an ambiance, but also a culture where you can say that without people being defensive, but go, oh my God, I didn't think about that. I think you have come a long way.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story. A former leader of mine named Tressa Angel, who's an executive at a different company now here in the United States. She had this wonderful expression she would use with our team, that was that we always need to remember to play for the name on the front of the jersey and not on the back. And functionally, there's always a time and a place to speak for yourself and to think about what you want in your career and what's important to you. But the organization, the team, is only going to go so far as the organization goes, right? As the team goes as a collective. And that's a responsibility for everyone on the organization to make sure that we're all heading in the same direction and picking each other up along the way.
I love that. I think that is a good reminder. I love the picture of that too, and the metaphor. I think we all can understand that. So I might borrow that, but also mention who actually said it first. But I really like that, and I think it comes down to being from a small country like Sweden is, and if you're in a quite small company too, the power of we, right? Right now in this part of the world, there's the Euro Cup, the Women's Euro Cup. And I think if you are Swedish, there's no way that you should have companies like the Electrolux or, the Volvo and the Saabs or the Klarnas or the Spotifys or Scanias or, Husqvarnas, and I can go on, IKEA or H&M. Because for the longest time, we were only 8 million people in this country. Same thing goes with sports. There's no way a country with today, 10, 11 million people should have any chance of winning any sports, especially the biggest sports like football. But here we are again. The Swedish, I don't want to jinx anything, but the Swedish women are now in the quarterfinal, and it looks pretty good, right? So there's something to be said of the power of we. There's something to be said of if you find a way to collaborate and where you might not have the top players on every position, but together and the camaraderie and all that. So I think we have a couple of things going for us, especially in this part of the world, where we always had to kind of trust each other and also find ways of the community, the sense of community and belonging.
Yeah. Well, Katarina, thank you so much for sharing your time and perspective today. I think it's a wonderful conversation. As we wrap up and before we let you go, is there an initiative or a message that you'd like us to help amplify for you?
So many, but as you mentioned, when we started together with the team, I wrote a book called Bold, which is trying to describe a new era within HR that is a bit more strategic and a bit more bold, obviously. And all the royalties goes to Min Stora Dag, which, if you translate it into English, is My Big Day, where they make kids that are struggling with diseases and illnesses can wish for a day, and where their dreams come true, so they can get the energy and the courage to fight another day. So I would like to mention Min Stora Dag.
No, very good. I love it. Okay, well, like I said, Katarina, thank you for joining us in this conversation today, and we wish you nothing but the best in your next chapter with On.
Thank you, and it was my pleasure.